All right, hello, welcome back. This is Assassin's Creed Chronicles, the China levels. And this is actually a take two. I attempted to record this earlier, got nearly to the end, and something went wrong somewhere. So we're doing it again. What this video is going to be about, while you watch me pathetically play this game, the first few levels, where I look awesome and then it starts to go bad for me, is we're going to talk about, I just got my Ancestry DNA. I got one of those kits for Christmas. I just barely got the kit back, so I think they had a lot of things to do. A lot of people got the kit for Christmas. And going to discuss kind of genealogy and my DNA, first off, tell you where I come from, and then tell you why I think it's important, this whole genealogy thing and all that stuff. And, you know, this Assassin's Creed, first off, is the perfect one to talk about DNA and ancestry and whatnot, because it's all about ancestry and DNA. They have this machine called the Animus, which allows you to experience the ancestry of your... experience the actual memories of your ancestors and play through them like a video game, which is really, really cool. I would love to do that on my ancestors, find out a lot more about my own history, but regardless. And I had hoped that I would get Chinese ancestry in my background. My uncle actually got Chinese ancestry in his background, but sadly I did not. I also hoped for Egyptian, didn't get that either, so too bad. So I did get a few surprises, but a lot of stuff weren't really that surprising. So, first off, 32. First off, this is not just what your ancestors had, but what's dominant in your own genetic DNA. Just making that clear. So, at 32%, this is the highest by far, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Now, I have Scotland and Wales in another category on my list, so I'm going to just kind of remove them and say I'm about a third Irish. Based upon this. I know in my own personal study of my own history that I'm at least quarter Irish, so yeah, just going to claim another 7-8% there for Irish. Now, this second one, at 31%, this was a surprise to me, but also it kind of makes sense. It's Scandinavia, so that's Norway, Denmark, that other place up there. Please don't hate me if you're from that other place up there and I can't remember the name. Anyway, Scandinavia. Now, this makes sense because I have a condition which, shorn of all the medical complexities in terms of it, it basically means I'm allergic to the sun, which is predominant among people from places like Ireland and Scandinavia. So, not a big surprise that nearly two-thirds of my genetic background comes from Scandinavia. Now, we're going to move on. So I've got several Europes listed here. At 13%, I have Europe West, so the western part of Europe. At 12%, I have Europe South. At 10%, I have Great Britain, which includes is England, Scotland, and Wales, and doesn't include Ireland. From my own side of my family history, I have no idea if I have anyone Welsh in my background, but I do know both a little bit of Scotland and a little bit of England in my background. So, yep. So, yeah, no big surprise there. Then I have Europe East at less than 1%, and the Iberian Peninsula, which is Portugal and Spain, at less than 1%. So pretty much all of that put together means I am a mutt of Europe, essentially. So all my DNA is, yeah, very European. And then the final one, and I was happy about this, was European Jewish. It's also less than 1%. I'm happy about that because for many years I thought we had Jewish in our ancestry. My family did, and then I discovered that we didn't, and I'm not sure where the idea came from of the European Jewish in our ancestry. But I'm happy that it is there, so I feel vindicated. Also, according to that, it's not just the European area, but it can also include Israel in that. So for all I know. So I showed these results to my mother. Her first response was, "Honey, you are the whitest man I know." So very, very white person, but did get some really fun, cool responses there. But one thing they included, which was interesting, is they take a look at the DNA and say, okay, because of this DNA, there are certain migrations that you could be a part of. And based on my knowledge of family history, they nailed it, at least for me. First one is the Mountain West Mormon pioneers, the people who went west, the Mormons who went west to settle that land, which I know from my family history, I am part of that. So that's a really cool one to have. And the other one is the New England settlers, the people who came from Europe to America from New England and settled there. So I don't know if they base that a little bit on the fact that I am an American or not, but it's really cool that they did do that and did validate that. Slightly side note, one time period and location I think they really do need to do for Assassin's Creed would be the Mormon pioneers area. There's so much really cool stuff that happened during that time period that I think would make for a great game. Anyway, so after sharing that with you, you're probably wondering, who cares, right? Why is it important to know your family history, your genealogy, and stuff like that? And the answer is that it's really important to figure out, in knowing who you are, to know where you came from. So, being Irish, my grandmother was Irish, and she had would always include our Irish heritage, our Irish traditions in that. And when she talked about, say St. Patrick's Day or something like that, she would use that phraseology. So it's nice for me to look at that and think to myself, okay, I am Irish. A few people have stated that my eyes are I have Irish blue eyes, and a few people have actually identified me as Irish just by looking at my eyes. So that connects me with my past, connects me with my grandmother, immediate past, and then you can look at people hundreds or thousands of years ago who were my ancestors and know their story, know what they did. So it connects you to the past, and it helps develop who you are today. It affects you. I mean, I have a tradition in my family of corned beef and cabbage on St. Patrick's Day, which I absolutely love corned beef. I think it's really delicious. It's great for me. But it connects you to your past, and I think a lot of people nowadays, especially people who are orphans or come from like single part families, don't really have that same connection with their family. So I think it's important that they research their genealogy, and if they don't really have genealogy to research, do the DNA, Ancestry DNA, and find out really where your ancestors came from. And you'll find some surprises, but you'll find some really cool stuff that you already knew about as well. So those are the positive, but one of the things I've noticed is that there have been some negatives that have come up in recent years about our ancestors, about genealogy and ancestry, and I'm going to give 3 examples and really explain why and how I think they should, why I think these are negatives. So one of the things that I've noticed a lot of people do is they focus on the negative in their ancestry. So that a lot of people will come out and say, well, something really bad happened to one of my ancestors, so I'm owed. So the world owes me because something bad happened to my ancestors. And that's a very common attitude nowadays. And, that's one side of it. And that, just coming out and saying it, I don't think it's a good... Never focusing on the negative is never a good idea. It's almost always a very bad idea. Acknowledge, accept it, and deal with it. Live with the negative. Confront it and face it, but don't make it the sole thing you think about or focus on. One of the things I've noticed, just having lived so long, having studied family history, if you study your family history, you will find two things. This is regardless of who you are, regardless of your own ancestry. These 2 things are a constant in your family history. One, at some time, one of your ancestors horribly discriminated against someone, abused, attacked, did some really terrible stuff. That's true of everyone's ancestry. And 2, one of your ancestors was horribly, horribly discriminated against, or was horribly, horribly hurt by somebody discriminating against them. I said or, I should have said and. That's the consistent. There's so many things that have happened in human history, both good and bad, that you go back far enough, you'll find both of those things. And the mistake is in focusing on just the bad stuff. Now, the one side, like I said, are people who feel that they are owed. They feel that they, because something bad happened to someone even 50 or 100 years ago, that somehow they should be compensated for that. The problem with that attitude is that somebody is eventually going to have to compensate. That's it. Who's going to compensate for them? The people who did the horrible things that their ancestors, that happened to their ancestors, probably aren't around anymore. Because if it's 50 plus years, odds are they're not around anymore, and so the people who you're asking for compensation from have done nothing wrong. So, it gets into some dodgy territory when you do things like that. And it also increases this sense of entitlement, which may not be earned. Basically, one of the best things about being human is earning things. Going out, working hard, and earning things. You can see that at least a bit in video games, where you go out, you earn trophies, you beat the level, you do things like that. And when you just, say, use a cheat code, you don't earn the things that that you want compensated for. So it's dangerous in that regard. Now, the other coin of this, or the other side of this, is, if this were a coin, the other side of the coin, is this idea, this concept that, oh my gosh, my ancestors did horrible things, I owe these people something. And, the problem with that, and I've seen this a lot with a lot of other people, and like I said, the problem with that is that, you could go out, is that you could never give enough. And this is, as a very true thing, you can never give enough to compensate for something your ancestors did. And this, secondly, on this, is that I honestly, on a personal level, do not believe that the sins of the father should affect the son, or the sins of the parent should affect the son. So, I do not believe that I should have to pay for something an ancestor of mine did, hundreds or even thousands of years ago. And I don't believe anybody should pay me for something that their ancestors did hundreds or thousands of years ago. I don't think that's a fair or just system, a good way to do things. So with these next two examples, I'm going to use real people in these examples, because both of these have come up recently in conversations and things like that, or in controversies, I suppose you'd call them. And I really don't. I'm going to give these people the benefit of the doubt, because I honestly don't know either way. But I'm going to use their what they've been accused of as an example in this regard. Now, the first person is Elizabeth Warren. Now, Elizabeth Warren is a woman who claimed to have Cherokee heritage. Now, nothing wrong with having Cherokee heritage. In fact, I think that's actually a good thing to have. But she claimed Cherokee heritage and actually got a professorship at Harvard based, at least in part, on having Cherokee heritage. And she was listed as someone who was a Cherokee in the records of Harvard. And it was later discovered that she did not have any Cherokee heritage. Now, her version of the story, what she said about this was that it's her family tradition that they were Cherokee, and she didn't know she wasn't descended from Cherokees. And like I said, I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt in this regard. that's entirely possible. It could have happened that way. She could be just someone who made a mistake with their ancestry, which just coming out with it. If that is the correct thing that happened, which I'm giving her that benefit, then I think that's a very, very good lesson about checking your DNA, your family history, making sure it is indeed accurate. Especially if you're going to claim a privilege, as she did when she was hired by Harvard. Yeah. So check your DNA, check all that stuff, make sure you've got it right. Now, this is going to affect her. Even if it was an honest mistake, this is still going to affect her. There's been rumors that she might run for president of the United States, and this is going to come up on both sides of the political spectrum. People are going to wonder whether she appropriated the Cherokee culture for her own gain. Her own gain. And this is something that's going to affect her for years and years to come. And it could just have been, like I said, an honest mistake. But an interesting part. So, this idea, and it's not just her. This has happened before. People claiming a background, a history, an ancestry that they don't have for their own gain. This has happened before. But what struck me about this is that it's not just... this isn't a recent development. This has been going on for many, many years. All the way back to... I know the Romans did it. It could go back as... Ancient Romans did this, and could go back as far as the ancient Greeks as well. But what Romans would do is that they would alter their own ancestry to claim that they were descended from one of their gods. And, if you were, say, the great-grandchild of, say, Poseidon, that would raise, your social status. It would give you advantages that you would otherwise not have had you not been related to Poseidon. And it's interesting that people are doing a similar thing, claiming a heritage that is not their own to gain some sort of a political advantage or a social status. The terminology I've used with this is called a false genealogy. And so, yeah, I'm going to come right out and say I totally disagree with doing this sort of thing. I don't think it's healthy to do that. And like I said with Elizabeth Warren, if she is indeed if she is indeed what is the right word? If her claim that it was part of her own family tradition is accurate, then yeah, just be careful. Just make sure your family traditions are correct, that you are actually descended from somebody before you attempt to claim an advantage for that descendant, being descended from them. And the final thing, warning about the negative stuff dealing with genealogy that certain people do, is I'm going to use the person I'm using as example is Ben Affleck. So this is what happened. Ben Affleck appeared on a PBS show where where they have a genealogist come in and study your family history and then talks to you about it and tells you like stuff about your family history. Now, after he appeared on this show, his show, it came out. It was reported by somebody on the show that he had that one thing that they had discovered that he had a slave. Somebody in his ancestry had owned slaves, and his what he had done was asked them. Was basically, said, no, we are not doing this segment, and exerted pressure so that they wouldn't reveal that one of his ancestors had owned slaves. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. Like I said, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt and saying it was just a report. But if it were true, this is actually kind of a very dangerous thing. It's basically a revisionist history, revising your own history. And that can be very dangerous. Revising your own history can and often is a very dangerous thing. And the reason for it is that your history, both good and bad, makes up who you are. So, for example, if I had an ancestor who owned slaves, I don't know if I do or not. I probably have an ancestor who did far worse than own slaves, so like that. But that is, like I said, a part of who you are. It's led you to this point. And there's a saying about history: those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And the same is even more true of your personal family history. If you don't know your family history, you are doomed to make the same mistakes that your ancestors may have made. Now, I'm not saying that Ben Affleck, by denying this, would say necessarily own slaves, but he might go through a similar process, mentally go through a similar process that his former slave owners went through in justifying that sort of action. Not necessarily in owning slaves, but in some other regard. And he would make a similar mistake to what his ancestors made. Now that's never a good thing. Repeating history in that regard is never good. Making the same mistakes over and over again when you could have learned from them is always a better way to go. So anyway, that's a quick look at my own DNA. I hope you enjoyed watching my playing of Assassin's Creed Chronicles China. Fortunately for me, we didn't get to the parts where I really screwed up and I did something stupid and had to redo areas and stuff like that. But we're getting close to them, so I better end the video now. Anyway, like and subscribe if you liked it. Recommend getting your Ancestry DNA. Go to ancestrydna.com and get your Ancestry done. It is a little bit expensive, but it is well worth it to do that. And, yep, I will see you in the next video. Bye.
Got it.